There we go.
All right. I think we're
Really?
live.
We are live. What's
So so this is episode 2 of Bare Knuckles and Brews. Today we have a couple guests from the athletic commissions from their respective states. And so we're gonna swap it up a little bit from last week and show you guys some range. So before we get started, you can watch this on youtube.com/fightbananas. The Fight Bananas Facebook page. You can watch it on Bare Knuckles and Brews Facebook page. Enjoy the show. I'm joined as always with the beautiful and talented Sheena Starr,
beautiful?
and we're gonna have some fun. So
Right on.
So first of all, let's handle business. Thanks to again Mary Jane's House of Glass. They do a lot of things from CBD to pre-rolls to glass work. Definitely go check them out. I'll put a link to their website.
They're awesome. They're your one-stop shop for your holistic needs. Mary Jane. I mean, the name in itself says what it is. They have the good. So check them out. Mary Jane's House of Glass. There's the website. Doesn't get much more easier than that, Vince.
Yeah. All right. And secondly, we're also sponsored by Empire Fighting Championship. They're a local MMA promotion in Mississippi. We have people like the guy that I'm supporting today. This hero, Harris Sandman Stevenson, fights for them. Chase Sherman, a lot of names that you already know. Go check them out. They just started up a YouTube page. I'm going to show that right here. So definitely go check those guys out. They've already sent a couple people to the UFC. It's the hottest thing in the South right now as far as MMA goes. So show them some love, and thanks for your support, guys. So with that, Sheena, you
So we're gonna
you want to talk about our next guest?
Yeah. So our next guest is. What are we going to explain?
How about we bring him on and let him introduce himself? He has a long resume.
That's about. We see him at all these different events. We see him at Bare Knuckle professional events. We see him at K1. He's at boxing. I've worked with him, myself at Glory Kickboxing. Thomas, he's the ISKA director for the state of New York, residing in the state of New York. Thomas, why don't you introduce yourself and kind of explain what it is that you do? What is it? Because you're not a state athletic commissioner, but you're so important in all these other ways, and you're so multi-dimensional. You just are not involved in one sport. You are across the board. You are at Glory Kickboxing. You are at Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. You're across the globe. You're across the globe. I mean, it's amazing what you do. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, Vince. And I get to do exactly what I love. I love what I do and do what I love. Having been in this sport, well, combat sports from boxing to the martial arts for the last 48 years, it gives you a different perspective. I've grown up with it. It's been a part of my life. It still is, and I'm in a position now where along the way there have been obstacles for fighters. There have been things that we all have not been happy about. Now I'm in a position to do more and to make changes, and I'm from going from a fighter to an instructor to an official to even trying my hand as a promoter with the New York Fight Exchange for 4 years to help legalize MMA. This is just another, probably the most exciting rung on my ladder with Bare Knuckle. We're exactly where MMA was 20 years ago, with people's opinions about it and not justified opinions. So I'm actually in a position as a regulator or as a regulatory liaison. ISKA being the largest sanctioning body in the world, we do over 300 shows a year in more than 50 countries. And you're right, Sheena. We are the regulators for IS for Glory. We're the regulators for Bellator. And even though we go to a state where there's an ABC in place, like Mississippi or New York, for example, where I'm from, what we do is we help the promotion meet the requirements to um, to be a part of the standards that that commission has set, so that the promotion doesn't have to be um, guessing. This is what we do, and we do it very well. So where there is no ABC, we can come in and sanction it and be that
Mm-hmm.
authority. But where there is an ABC, we're not working for the promotion. We're not working for the commission. We're right there in the middle with no axe to grind. We interpret the rules of the commission, and we make sure that the promotion follows them. And we've seen that happen. Probably the best example was when PFL came to New York, and their main event was canceled because they did not understand the weight classes that the New York State Commission had. And we make sure that doesn't happen. We make sure that um, all the all the medical blood work, everything is in line. We tell them what that state requires. We tell them what their rules and regs are. And we also make sure that the officials that are going to be part of that show understand the rules of bare knuckle fighting championships. They understand what's required of them. So we are a very integral part, and I'm very very excited to be a part of something like bare knuckle that's gonna just be it's exploding on the scene from what we've done so far.
That's a that's a tall order. That's again showing how multidimensional you are, and what you are, what you're able to do, what you're able to provide, not just knowing one set of rules and one state athletic commission. You need to know everybody's rules and be able to step foot in each of these different entities or different areas, and be able to professionally conduct and follow the regulations based on the legislation of whatever state you're in. So I mean, that's a lot. Con, congrats to you, because that sounds like a big pain in the butt, and
No,
that's a lot. That's a lot. Well, you deserve the credit, because it is. And I mean, how did you get started in this part of your journey? I know you had mentioned that you were a combatant or a fighter, or competed yourself. What transition did you have
Tom's a
to
black
take
belt,
going
from what I understand.
going exactly, what transition from going from a competitor to where you're at now? How did that come about?
again, you get older, and you don't want to get hit anymore. So that's you know that better than anybody. You're not ready to retire, and I would think you personally, you're an amazing fighter. You're an amazing coach. You're a cut person. You really have
Thank you.
done it all, and you've set this standard for other fighters that they can still be a part of the sport they love. And for me, probably the thing that I love more than anything is refereeing. Unfortunately, it is a very competitive world, and I'm blessed that I've done as many fights as I have. But Corey Schaefer, who's my mentor and been around a long time, and he's written the rules for Glory. He's written the rules. He's so tied into the sport. He's learned. He's already done everything. So I'm learning from him. So I've got a mentor who offered me an opportunity to take the ball and run. ISK wasn't in New York. There was only one or two other sanctioning bodies, um, and when he offered it to me, there was the provision that I now am going to be doing this, and you can't have any conflict of interest. And it's the same as me being part of a commission. I work at the pleasure of the commissions. I am licensed by the commission, so I am an arm of that wherever I go. So we have to know the rules. We have to know of each state. And like I said, Corey Schaefer has paved that way for me. So when I became involved with Bare Knuckle, this has almost become an exclusive for me, where I've committed myself to Dave Feldman, and I absolutely love what I'm doing. So it's Corey's given me the license to run with it, to do the right thing, and I've sat down with so many commissioners. I was really looking forward to the seminar, the convention in Kansas with Sean Wheelock, who you're going to have
I
on
was going to ask about that.
Right.
Yeah, so that's
Right.
that was. I thought this was going to set the table for talking about bare knuckle from a regulatory point of view, from what
And
we see
and and
there,
and it definitely will. And I know you have had a big part in helping the newly legalized sport of bare knuckle fighting grow, and you have been a big part of really
Making it
helping
mainstream,
to
yeah.
open up other states to the idea, or even offering to come in as a second party, regulatory type of entity to kind of coach these guys through their first couple events, and really helping support the sport as a whole. I mean, how did you go about that? I know you had a big part in Florida. um I mean, you're at all the Florida events. We see you all the time. We see your face, but not a lot of the fighters and those around, really knew who you were. And I thought that was really important for us to bring you on. And and again, I really thank you. I really thank you for taking the time out of your evening to come on, and explain these things to us so we can better understand them. What is the process that needs to be done? Let's say, for instance, a state like Arkansas. We want to bring bare knuckle fighting to Arkansas. Well, it's not regulated, or it's not legal there yet. What is the process for a state or an athletic commission to have their first bare knuckle event, and what all like takes place? I mean, I know it's a lot, but if you can simplify it a little bit.
that's a fair enough question, and that is exactly what the ISK does. By It's like, for example, if you got to go to court, you wouldn't want to represent yourself and be your own lawyer. That
Right.
just never works. So we step in. It's like one of my favorite places, Massachusetts, for example, where I've been a referee and been part of their commission for many years. And when bare knuckle came about, um, to be able to go down there to take their CMR 283, their rules, everything. There's like hundreds of pages. Go through every one of them for establishing, why bare knuckle will fit into their program, how to write the variances, how to explain what the differences that bare knuckle is doing versus traditional boxing, and making the argument very clearly. We're not going in as a promoter who's is perceived by commissions as just somebody who wants to get the venue, wants to get his promotion out there and sell tickets. We don't have that axiogram. If we accept, when I explain to commission, we accept that boxing, kickboxing, MMA in combination reflect the current regulatory safety standards. It's unthinkable that a bare knuckle fighting fails to meet that standard. A boxing match can culminate in 36 minutes of activity, the vast majority of which are repeated strikes to the head. Kickboxing allows, um, you know, it allows unpadded strikes with the foot, ankle, shin, knee, and MMA allows bare forearm and elbow strikes to the head of a ground
Seems
control
much more
opponent.
dangerous, right?
Objectively speaking, 5 2-minute rounds of bare knuckle striking seems entirely reasonable and well within the established and acceptable paradigm concerning risk and safety, concerning the health
Right.
and well-being of
Do
the
you feel, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you feel enough time has elapsed with the newly legalization of the sport to be able to really form that type of opinion? Because I get asked this a lot. It's the only reason why I really interrupt it. It's like, well, you know what? It's only superficial damage. It's mostly cuts. We're not seeing broken ribs. We're not getting torn ligaments and snap joints and whatnot. But it's still kind of new. So it's I mean, how many years or how long do you think that we really need to collect this information to really make a good solid determination on the safety of it? I mean granted, you're not a medical professional, either am I, but just from your opinion, I mean you have decades and decades and decades, so much experience, you've been around forever. What do you think?
Well, exactly what you just said. Not being a medical professional, but I was on the phone earlier today with Dr. Don Muzzi, who's the president of the Association of Ringside Physicians, who's at almost all the bare knuckle fights.
Mhm.
He has compiled a database of the injuries sustained, cuts, lacerations, TKOs, KOs, everything, and putting that together. So to answer your question, we're still building momentum. We're still creating a database. We're still going out there to exactly as he said. There's many cuts, contusions, and abrasions, and you have to understand that that creates a perception. And that perception is that we're a very, you look at a fighter, and I've seen you look like two different people before and after the fight.
You sure have.
Yeah, it's scary because I know you and we're friends, and then you see the damage and you think, oh my God, this is such a dangerous sport. But then a week later, you're back to you, and
Right.
that's the way it is. You get into a fight like as kids, you get a black eye, bloody nose, it's over. Whereas,
We're in the hurt business. Bill
yeah,
Clancy did the same thing. Oh my gosh, it was like my dad after my fight. Don't do that.
yeah. So we have to get past that. It's like everything else. If somebody doesn't like combat sport, don't watch it. It's not. You have no right to say we don't want it. It's banned, and I find that the most unbelievable aspect of that are experienced commissioners in states that are not allowing it because they're saying, oh, the blood, to this, to that, to that, and we're not going to allow that. But yet they have the MMA, they have UFC, Bellator, PFL in their states, and the damage. I'm not saying there are less injuries in bare knuckle than MMA. There are injuries, but I think to answer your question, we're going to have to continually fight to prove that we're not we're not any more dangerous or less dangerous than anything that's already approved.
I
Hey
agree. I
Tom,
agree.
we 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 definitely try to preach that as much as possible. I know I do. Repeated punches to the face, over 12 rounds or whatever, and catching shins and elbows and forearms to the head is, some people accept that far more than they accept, 5 2-minute rounds with bare fists when you have superficial cuts. So we appreciate that you breaking that down for us. So we also have Scott Burt kind of hanging out here in the lobby. I think he wants to ask you some questions as well. Is it okay if we bring him on?
Sure.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Hey,
Oh,
good, man. Good. Just chatting with Tom.
Hey, Vince. What's happening? There's Sheena, my Marie Bacchus Lady of the Person of the Year.
hanging out in my bedroom. Like this?
July will be honoring her. And Tommy and I talked earlier today. Tommy, welcome back from all that sickness you had, man. It was great talking to you today. And you're looking good, man. I'm glad you and your wife are doing good.
Just one more fight.
Yeah, we didn't even bring that up. Yeah, Tom, you recently fought off the COVID, right? You caught it and battled it out, and you're looking good, man. Looking healthy.
Yeah, it is. It is as serious as people say, and we've got a ways to go before things get back to normal.
Tommy, would you relate to him? And I know you and I talked today at length, but being that sick that you were, and people don't realize how sick you were, You commented to me, Tommy, about how it gave you a new light on people and friendships and family. And can you relay? Do you mind relaying that story about that you needed something and a man drove it all the way out to you?
It was kind of surreal that I talked to a number of my friends, and when we had come down with this virus, and then I had pneumonia, which made it even tougher. It was like like I do jujitsu, some heavyweight on my chest. I needed to get an iometer to measure my saturation, oxygen level, and they're sold out. Everything, whether it's a face mask, gloves, and whatnot. And I was talking to a friend of mine, Muhammad, and in Manhattan, and I told him, and in the course of the conversation, and he said, "Tom, hang on, I'll call you back in 10 minutes." And he did, and he said, "I have a friend that's a pharmacy. He has one. I'm going to drive it out to you." And I live 2 hours away, and I said, "No, no, no. Put it in the overnight. I'll give you my FedEx number." He said, "No, you need it today." He drove it out 2 hours on my doorstep, and I guess somebody had put on social media that I was fighting this thing, and I had pretty much over 1,000 uh, messages, responses on social media. It was just
That's
overwhelming.
awesome.
It was almost scary, but the fight community, many people heard me, mention it as my extended family, and that is the fight community that we know. It is just overwhelming. It's amazing. The people, fighters, and people that I haven't seen that I refereed their fights years ago send me a picture, me raising the hand, and it just is an overwhelming. It just validates what we all know, that we're in a very special community. We're in a very special group, whether you're a fighter, a coach, or it's just amazing people that have offered to come out to ship me whatever I needed, and it almost became scary because my kids, like in touch base with, were reading this stuff. It almost was like a memorial.
Yeah.
I had to call them up.
We were also
awesome.
worried. We were also worried about you. I was gonna mention that a little bit later on. I remember when I first heard it, Tom's got coronavirus, and I've been watching on Facebook, watching all these people and everything commenting. Somebody with coronavirus. No, you were my one person I knew, and I comment on everybody, giving them big middle finger, praying for you. It's so scary because not a lot of us, nobody really knew what was going on with it. And
Tommy,
as you were explaining in the beginning, Tommy is so important to all of us. He does so much work. He's fighting for our sport, and he is just an awesome fellow. I'm gonna let Scott chime in.
Tommy, we've also heard on social media that your beautiful wife Devin had come down with it. Can you comment so people know that she is all right, or is she still fighting it?
We're both fine, as you can see. We're both battling back, and she might actually, she's around here somewhere. But yeah, we're both fine. And now I know her. She won't come on camera unless she's done her hair and nails. But yeah, she's great. We're both great, and we can't thank our friends enough for their care and concern.
Well, I'm glad you're doing well, Tommy. I don't want to chew up too much time here, but Sheena and Vince, I do want to take the opportunity that Tommy and I were talking about today to clear up the induction in the Hall of Fame that's going to happen in July 11. And so for the listeners that know, because this is a huge opportunity, Sheena's already been to Belfast and seen all of it. And I know she can talk for a long time about that. But, Dave has got planned a BKFC for July 11th in the evening. And our induction is in the morning, the day before, if we're lucky, fingers crossed. We hope to have a stage set up in front of the Hall of Fame and maybe do the weigh-ins there. See, the fight is only 45 minutes away from the Hall of Fame, which is outstanding. Gives everybody an opportunity. So saying that, if for some reason that Dave has to move his July 11th fight in Salamanca, which I tell you, everybody around here is nuts for. They can't wait for it to happen. But if he has to move it, if I can do it, I'm going to move the Hall of Fame induction to match whatever new date that he has. So that
That's
people
awesome.
traveling in from all over the place have the opportunity to see both a super fight and that once in a life experience of actually walking through the Hall of Fame, those barns that Sullivan walked in and trained in 130 years ago that were locked up for 130 years. So Vince and Sheena, I want to take the opportunity to make sure the viewers know that, and that I'm going to piggyback off of whatever Dave does for the viewers. Tommy, I'm glad to see that you are doing wonderful. And Sheena and Vince, anytime you want to have a long, boring story about history and get educated, just give me a holler. Happy to help you guys out anytime.
I love.
You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice, Scott.
I love
history is the glue that holds it all together,
Scott.
or it's the icing on the cake, whatever, however you want to look at it. It's so important.
I need to keep you on for another couple minutes, seeing you want to pop on. And tonight's show, we're talking about sanctioning and
Sheena's
Brews.
talking, I can't hear. I don't know if you guys can.
You can't hear me? Or are you just like messing with me? Oh, are you being serious? Scott?
I think he lost audio. So Tom, again, thanks for jumping on, man. I don't think there would be a Bare Knuckle FC without your efforts. Congratulations on all of your accomplishments and beating the COVID, and you're looking good, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you for having me. I'm really proud to be part of the Bare Knuckle with my
Hey, hang on. I've got one of those.
Hey, I can kind of match that.
There you go.
Oh, wait a minute. I can match it. I can match it better than both of you guys. Because I got the shirt.
My drink for the night.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Hopefully we can have you back soon, buddy.
All right.
Tom, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time.
Later. You guys take care now. Thank you so much, everybody.
See you later, Scott. Tom, we all appreciate you. I appreciate you for taking the time to come on. I am absolutely just feeling wonderful that, you're healthy enough and you were feeling good enough to come on to, grace us with your presence. And, I was worried about you, man. I was worried about you. Coronavirus. I mean, it's scary. So, we all know you're tough. Ain't nothing gonna kill you. You know what I mean? But still, bro, it was a little nerve-wracking there for a little bit. But I'm glad you've been able to pull out of it. Best regards to Devin. Bless her heart. And I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to seeing your face. Hopefully in July. All this will be boiling over, but before I let you go, this event in New York.
Yeah.
Is that got something to do with you? I mean, we're
excited about it. Again, it's going to come down to what the governor says.
Yeah.
In terms of whether or not you can have an event. If the venue allows it and we're good to go. Obviously, we don't know if there are going to be fans allowed, and
right.
So many other aspects that we have to take into account in terms of testing the fighters, testing the officials, space distance between the officials, that type of thing. And the average corona test right now, COVID test, takes 10 days. So you can't even have a fighter like come in, be tested. Why can it 10 days?
I don't. Do you think it would come to that though, like a flu-like virus having to? I mean,
we don't know.
It's so weird, but the legality of it is it's been approved though. Like there's a venue in New York that we're approved to have a bare knuckle fight at. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
And how did you do that?
You have to understand that this virus takes on a different thing every day. We're trying to
Oh, for sure.
We're trying to flatten the curve. We're trying to get to a new place. So anything can happen. I mean, whether what we're allowed to do today could change tomorrow. It really is something that it's going to come down to the commission. It's not about the state commission. It's going to be about the governor and what he mandates. Right. In terms of they canceled the UFC fight in California, even though
I watched that, but then I watched Florida flip and say WWE is an essential business. So like we're just trying to figure out who's making the rules here. We're like, okay, wait a minute, but I get it. Every place is different. Every state is different. Everybody has a different impact on this pandemic has had a different impact on all these individual places differently, and it's so many politics. It's just it's so confusing. I'm just trying to figure out who's making the rules, but I think we can all agree that this is only temporary. Our events will return. It will get back to normal. It's just we just don't know when, and that sucks. So, let's keep each other in the loop. Keep me in the loop. If I hear anything, I'll keep you in the loop. You know how we do. So I appreciate you taking the time this evening, and coming and speaking with us, and really giving us the inside look and shedding some light and some education. Especially with the doctor's deposition. An ABC cage-side physician, saying, hey, that's big stuff. So, I appreciate you for, doing that.
Anytime. Vince, thank you so much. And
yes, sir. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your show with John Lewis and Sean coming on. And two very, very good guys and the wealth of experience. So, yeah.
Right. I think John might have to cancel. See, this is the thing with Mississippi is I don't know what it is.
Watch it now. Watch it.
They got it's just a satellite signal there. It comes.
You wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand.
I live in northern Michigan by Canada. My satellite.
Hi, Sean.
I get it. So we might have to postpone or cancel John. Unfortunately, he is in a he's in a bad area. It happens, so, but we're going to bring on this awesome, wonderful, well-educated, he's everything. He's got every credential you could ever freaking imagine. I would love.
Thanks again, Tom.
Thanks again.
Sheena's rambling. I
was not rambling. I was trying to introduce Sean Wheelock. All right, but Sean, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey, Sheena.
The best commentator in the world.
Oh, man, that's so nice of you to say, Vince. Vince, how are you? Sheena, good to see you, my darling. And it was nice to see Tom, and I was listening with Scott Burt as well. So this is a great show. I'm really happy to be on. Thanks for having me. I was very pleased when I got your message, Sheena.
I was ecstatic when you accepted, especially with what the subject matter was like. Hey, can I bring you on for some official, factual stuff? And you're like, yeah, I'm game on. I'm ready. I want the people to know what the deal is. I want to clear the air on things. I want it. There's so much miscommunication. I see it across Twitter. I see it across Facebook. People get confused that may not understand how these processes work. Why does this state do this and this one not, and this one say this? So there's not any better person, in my own personal opinion, that is no better to explain some of those certain things. Maybe not all of them, but Sean Wheelock.
No one can articulate it as well as Sean.
Thank you. No, that's really nice of you to say, guys. Well, the first thing I think to understand is that the governing body of combative sports, and combative sports means different things to different commissions, but largely we're talking about boxing, bare knuckle, MMA, kickboxing, Muay Thai, largely. Some states look at things differently, and we can get into that, some commissions. But the overall governing body is called the ABC, which started as the Association of Boxing Commissions. You can see that they weren't regulating MMA or anything else when they gave it that name. It's still called the ABC, but the full name is the Association of Boxing Commissions and Combative Sports. It's really a confederation. There's no federal power. There's no government oversight. It's a loose confederation, and I stress the word loose, of these various commissions, and these are U.S. states as well as Native American grounds, provincial tribes. The Mohegan Sun in Connecticut would be a prime example of that.
Missouli's.
Exactly,
Right.
Missouli, absolutely. Our good friend Mike Missouli.
Yes.
They come together and they try to put together different rules, different standards, different ideas. But ultimately, it comes down to the individual states. You know, there's been a lot of talk in this country about the difference between a democracy and a republic, and the fact of states' rights. And I'm not going to get political on this. I will on the ABC. I certainly won in world politics, but because nobody wants to hear that. But can a federal government mandate a state opening, that type of thing? It goes down to being a democracy or a republic, right? Subtle, but
absolutely.
there's a stark difference. You follow that line of thinking over into combative sports. So the ABC, for instance, cannot suspend a fighter. A commission suspends a fighter, and then other commissions within the ABC generally, but not always, uphold that suspension. If they don't, they get peer pressure. They might get some mean phone calls or emails. Some people deal with that, some people don't. So that's a big place to start, is that there's no overarching commission nationwide. There's not a confederation. There's nothing like the NFL. There's nothing like FIFA. There's nothing like the U.S. Olympic Committee. There's nothing even like the British Board of Boxing Control that oversees combative sports in this country.
Right, and that was that was kind of the point of the summit in Kansas City, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, which unfortunately another thing that got wiped out by COVID-19. We were hosting, we meaning the Kansas Athletic Commission, we're going to host the first ever Bare Knuckle Summit. And essentially what we said is, look, if you're going to come here, which we didn't think you would, but if you're going to come here, the royal you, as I'm talking about, not you, Vince, and not you, Sheena. But if one were to come and try to debate the merits, we would tell you to go home, probably pretty forcefully, because that's not what this is about. It was about advancing the sport, setting some standard of unified rules, just getting everyone together on the same page, and that's fight promoters.
Absolutely.
What happened to Sean? I was
lost him, so
there we go.
Technology.
Sorry, Sean. You popped off.
I was just about to chime in. I have noticed Kansas Athletic Commission is very
progressive.
Dare I say open.
Thank you.
Their committees and their meetings are completely open to the public. Anybody can attend. Everybody has a say, has a word. That I've seen. I mean, I've been around for maybe 15 years. It's not a long time, but Kansas is really unique with their approaches and progressions, and touch base on some of that uniqueness, especially with the new round by round judging criteria. And there's so many things that Kansas has done that is.
I was going to touch on that too. BKFC
awesome. And
BKFC was going to try open scoring at the Wichita card, right?
Yeah,
that would have been a first.
Go ahead.
You can talk about it.
No, Vince, please. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
No. I was just, leading you into it. That's all. I was going to get you to talk about it. Yeah, that we were supposed to have open scoring on a trial basis to see how it played out. I think they did it with Invicta, right?
That's right. It's been
it worked
used
out well.
Once. Had it not been for COVID-19, there probably would have been 6 to 8 shows that would have had open scoring in Kansas. And again, this goes back to the ABC. I'm a member of the Kansas Athletic Commission. I call it my lucrative non-paying job. I was appointed 6 years ago now by the then governor of Kansas. And I talk about being apolitical. I've been appointed by both a Republican and a Democrat. I keep my politics to myself, and I keep that as a non-political position. So I get paid nothing. And I don't even get gas reimbursement. In Kansas, we have an executive director. That's one of my best friends, Adam Rohrbach. And that's really my tag team partner on doing all of these progressive ideas, or some people would say awful ideas. I'm glad you guys see them as progressive. It's Adam's full-time job. And as I always remind him, it's easy for me to be kind of cavalier on this, because what are you going to do? Fire me from a non-paying job? It's how Adam supports his family. I support my family by being a fight commentator. I'm extremely fortunate. And I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I can take a gig that doesn't pay me anything, but still takes hundreds and hundreds of hours of my time. And I'm financially able to do that being on the Kansas Athletic Commission.
And you have influence.
And why do you do that? Why do you do that?
Because I love fighting, Sheena, and I want to make a difference for the good. That's the simple answer. It's, I don't want to just say it's totally altruistic, because I have a lot of fun doing it. I get a lot of personal fulfillment and pleasure out of going to fights, being involved, being right there on the front lines with this stuff. But I do feel like I'm hopefully making a difference. You make friends, you make enemies.
And for those that are not really familiar with you, how are you in this position to be so knowledgeable? What are the credentials, years and years? I mean, how did you progress from day one
commentator to
athletic commission, not even commentating. I mean, I know it goes a lot more. You've, and this is why I gotta watch my words.
No, you don't. Not with me. Not at all.
Yeah. I don't with you. All right. This is the shit I like. I love people that are on these athletic boards, people that are out here working for these regulatory bodies, that are out here sanctioning, that are, basically the day-to-day people working with the fighters, working with that have been either a fighter working in, the small shows, working their way up the ranks, years and years, decades even. We were talking to Tom earlier. I mean, 40 years in combat sports. And then now you're working at this position. I know some states and some areas, we'll get an athletic commission, and there'll be lawyers and retired police officers and politicians, and they don't really understand our sport, and it's so difficult trying to maneuver and just be a fine-tuned machine. So it's really a breath of fresh air to see somebody with so much credentials and so many years of experience that loves the sport. And that's the key factor. Love the sport. You're not doing this for money. You're not doing it for a paycheck. You do it because you love it.
Thank you, Sheena. That's really sweet of you to say. So, I've been a fight commentator for a long time. I actually started out in all this fun as a professional boxing referee when I was 22 years old. And basically I fell in with the wrong crowd, and a boxing promoter, I haven't talked to him in 15 years. I'm sure he's long out of the game, but a guy named Randy Cook. And if he's still around, I would love to speak to him. He gave me my break, but I was 22. I was hanging around boxing. I was kind of being his runner. This is in the pre-commission days. Now, you had commissions in states like New York, New Jersey, California, Pennsylvania. You certainly didn't in Kansas and Missouri at that time.
We have them in Michigan in 2016.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm talking the 90s, and this might as well have been the 1690s, because it was a very different era. But Randy Cook one day said to me, "Sean, I'm going to give you a choice. On my next card, do you want to fight or do you want to referee?" And I'm like, "Well, what's the money?" He goes, "Well, I'll pay you $200 to fight, or I'll pay you $50 to referee." And I thought, well, I probably won't get my nose broken if I ref, so I'm going to go ahead and take the $50 and ref.
Sounds so like Michigan.
Yeah, and that's how it started. I
got pictures of both.
Yeah, and I had absolutely I had more training as a boxer than as a referee, because at least I trained a little bit as a boxer. I trained zero as a referee, but I was a lifelong fan. I worshipped Mills Lane. And so I just tried to do a Mills Lane impersonation. And then within a year, I wound up meeting Mills Lane. I started going to his seminars, and I took it very seriously. But as my commentating career got going, that was kind of the end of my refereeing career. And then I started seeing what was happening in my state of Kansas. And even though I wasn't commentating much, if ever, in Kansas, when I was doing Pride and M1 and then Bellator, I was still seeing what was going on in Kansas, and I did not like it. and I would go to house shows and local shows. And I thought the commission, quite frankly, was an embarrassment. In fact, it was a disgrace. So I looked online and I found who the chairman of the athletic commission was, a man who's since become a close friend of mine, Tom Burrows. And Tom Burrows created the commission. And I told him who I was, and I said I would love to be on. And he said, we have a seat that will come vacant in 2 years. Let's stay in touch. And when that seat came vacant, I wound up being appointed. And that was 6 years ago. Through being on the Kansas Athletic Commission, it's allowed me to get in very, very deeply with the ABC. In 2015, I was appointed by our buddy Mike Mazzulli as chairman of the MMA Rules and Regs Committee. I co-chair that now with John McCarthy. So anything you like or don't like that you've seen since 2016, right? Like the grounded fighter rule or the emphasis on 10-8 rounds or the fact that there's the standardization of female attire in MMA, that's all our committee. So, you know,
I remember that when I remember, I'm sorry to chime in.
No, please go ahead.
I remember, and it was what was a thing because we used to not be able to wear shirts.
Right.
So it was like a rash guard shirt. They wanted us to wear like this tiny little sports bra and these little shorts, and it was absolutely ridiculous. And it was Kansas. It was Kansas that, you know, helped us.
Yeah, we standardized. We standardized and gave the choice.
With it. Yeah.
Right. And we allowed women to wear rash guards to the elbow. And we also said you can't wear loose T-shirts. You can't wear grappling pants. You can't wear a gi. You can't wear a wrestling singlet. And that was one of the things that we did. It's funny, in 2016, when we passed the first changes to the unified rules of MMA since 2001, you imagine that. We went from 2001 to 2016 without a single change in the unified rules of MMA. Think how much the sport changed in that period, and yet there were no changes to the rules. So we had the whole package of rules. One of them was you can now legally grab the clavicle. You could heel strike the kidney. Again, we changed the 10-8 round. There was a whole package. The thing that I was concerned we would get blowback on was standardization of female attire. I was concerned that people would see the opposite of what we were doing and thinking we were trying to be kind of lewd or kind of lascivious, if I can use a very outdated word.
Fighting league and crap.
Right, exactly.
I get it.
Yeah, and instead people picked up on the grounded fighter, right? And then they picked up on New Jersey, Missouri mainly, picked up on heel strikes to the kidneys, which are completely nonsensical. So, like I said, I have a blast doing it. There are some people in the regulatory world that don't like me, but guess what? I don't like them, so I don't really care.
Can't please everyone, man. You've made a huge difference.
Thank you.
You know, and it's something that you care about and something you're good at. So,
big time.
You know,
well, I don't know if I'm good at it, but I do care about it.
Yeah, right.
I care immensely about it, and I can tell you, and I mean, I can say it out. You know, like it doesn't matter where you go in any part of the sport, there's always going to be people that don't like each other. You got referees that are, you got cameramen, promoters, matchmakers. It's, you know, it's always going to be like that. And, you know, it shouldn't be, but you know what? Anytime you got money, title, anything involves, you know,
and ego.
You're gonna do that. But the important thing is the important stuff, like the rules, the regulations. This is why we do this. This is why this is important. You know, I see a lot of fighters, they don't understand rules like you know, the length of the shirts and the pants and the stuff. And, you know, we're going to bring on Rob Hinds here in just a moment. And, you know, he's going to help explain.
Rob is a great friend.
Yes, he is. And you know what? You know, and he's a big fan of yours.
No, I'm a big fan of his. Rob and I go back to, I met him in Bellator, and I think 2010 or 2011. That's how long I've known Rob. The first MMA refs and judges training seminar that I ever organized, I hired Rob Hinds for.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's such a pleasure to work with, and he's so professional and knowledgeable. And I just I like picking his brain just like I like picking your brain. And, you know, so I think, right around, you know, if Rob's ready to come on, I'm not sure if he's in the back yet or not.
Hey, Sean, I have a question for you real quick. Yeah. So, who initially approached you to do the commentating for BKFC? Because whoever it is, they deserve, you know, $1 million.
Man, I really
they hit a home run.
That's so nice of you. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. So at the time, I was commentating Bellator, and I was doing a podcast with John McCarthy. And like Rob Hinds, John McCarthy is a longtime, really close friend. John knew Bobby Gunn, and we would occasionally, not every week, but occasionally have guests on. We would try. Our rule was we just need big name guests. We're not going to have any guests on. We had Herschel Walker on the program.
Awesome.
We had Randy Couture on the program. He said, let's get Bobby Gunn. I said, oh, that's amazing. I don't know, or I've forgotten how John knew Bobby. This is like 2015 when I'm talking about now. So 5 years. And after the show, Bobby called me and he said, man, I want to introduce you to my manager, David Feldman, because he's going to try to make Bare Knuckle happen. He connected us. Dave and I started talking. I thought Dave was going to launch much earlier than he did. Obviously, all the commission issues got in the way. Dave and I struck up a friendship. So I've been commentating for Dave Feldman since day one, which is June 2nd, 2018. But I've actually been working with Dave Feldman for 4.5 years. So it's Bobby Gunn via John McCarthy on that. And it's a pleasure. As much fun as I had in Pride, as much fun as I had in Bellator, as much fun as I have doing things like Chael Sonnen and Submission Underground and Roy Jones Jr. Boxing.
It's exciting, man.
BKFC.
It's exciting.
There was I don't know if you can see. I'm going to angle this. There's a UFC 1 poster right there in my office.
Yeah,
and Art Davey is basically my surrogate father now in life. And Art Davey and I have talked so much about his launching and creating and founding the UFC. And from Wyoming, I called Art. I spoke to him 90 minutes ago. We speak every day on the phone. I speak to my mom every day, and I speak to Art Davey every day on the phone. And I said, Art, I feel like I'm in Denver on November 12th, 1993 at BKFC 1. There was that feeling that Art had described to me. And I watched UFC 1 live on pay-per-view as a kid. My mom paid the $14.95. So very vicariously awesome. I experienced it, but I know the stories through Art Davey and also John McCarthy, who was there. I know the John stories as well. He didn't referee, but John was in the corner of Hoist Gracie. The feeling of like, we're going into the great unknown. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not quite sure how this is going to look. I'm not sure how this is going to play out.
But I have a feeling, and I see the trajectory. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And as close as I will ever get in my life to being at UFC 1 was being at BKFC 1. And we were recording a show, I think it's on Facebook now, called BKFC Watch Party, and Joey Beltran and Tony Lopez were guests. And Chris Lytle and I walked through their fight from BKFC 1, and we were all talking about that experience of like, wow, what is going to happen? The first fight, Arnold AJ Adams and DJ Linderman. And I knew who AJ was. I never commentated him. DJ Linderman and I were in Bellator together. I knew him really well. So I had a sense of the fighting styles, and I remember when it started, and I'm commentating with Antonio Tarver, I kind of look at him like, this is insane. Like, as much of a history nerd as I am, and I've read,
this is huge.
Right. Yeah. I've read so much about Bare Knuckle, and I've studied, and I've watched the videos and the underground fights and the backyard fights and the warehouse fights and the fights from Ireland and the UK. I still thought, wow, this is amazing. And Art Davey had that experience at UFC 1, and David Feldman had that at BKFC 1, as did I think everybody in that building in Wyoming. It was insane, and I am deeply, passionately in love with BKFC.
Me too, man. I couldn't be more proud to be a part of it. I mean, we can all see where this is going. We can all see, that we're kind of on like a sharper slope than the UFC was even. I mean, there's so much to be proud of here, and there's so much more in the future. It's a great thing to be a part of.
There's no question.
I love it. I am absolutely excited for the new. Dare I say new, because it's been around, and it's like a throwback from history, reborn yet again. It's like a breath of fresh air. When every other, in my opinion, and I may be a little bit biased, but it's reached its plateau. Bare Knuckle in America has not reached its plateau yet. I mean,
for sure,
so much more to grow, and it's it reminds me of that UFC 1, 2. Right when they came out, when it was style versus style, and I really think that we get a good taste of that with Bare Knuckle. We have the boxer versus MMA fighter, or the Muay Thai fighter versus the but
Right.
it's more of a fight than it is an athletic competition, and it's so unique, it's so diverse, and I think it's really exciting because we get that style versus style, and there's so many matchups where we can't predict who's really going to win because everybody has that puncher's chance. Anything can happen in bare knuckle. There's no hiding. There's no record padding. This is real deal, in your face, 2-minute rounds. Boom, what are you going to do?
And it's a different sport, right? As we've all seen, and I think everybody watching this program right now knows that it's a different sport. If Artem Lobov versus Paulie Malignaggi in MMA happens, that is a quick squash in favor of Artem Lobov. Malignaggi versus Lobov happens. I think I know Artem will disagree, but even now at 38, I think Paulie wins that in boxing pretty handily.
In a boxing, absolutely.
Yeah. And yet we saw in bare knuckle a completely different sport. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so in love with BKFC and the entire sport of bare knuckle. It is a different thing in combat sports. Our mutual friend, Chris Lights Out Lytle, who I commentate now with. And Chris is someone who I long admired, and now we've become very, very close friends. And he's such a phenomenal color commentator. So happy he works with me. But you think Chris, throughout his MMA career, including 20 bouts in the UFC, he had 15 bouts as a pro boxer. And yet he's talked about fighting in bare knuckle. And he actually made his debut in England before BKFC launched. And just saying how different it felt and how he has to take some things that he did in MMA and some things they did in boxing, but nothing is entirely transferable. Sheena, you know that firsthand. Yeah, it is a different sport completely.
Hey, Sean, I got a quick question. So why do you think grapplers have so much more success than like boxers?
Yeah, great question.
In this sport. Yeah.
Great question. And it's just simply the clinch, the pummeling. Anybody who's trained at an MMA gym knows that you're going to work on overhooks. You're going to work on whatever you call it in your gym, whether you call it a half plum or a single collar tie. You're working on that. You're working on the pummeling. You're working on the infighting, the dirty boxing. Even if you've never trained MMA, but you've just trained jiu-jitsu or even judo, you have a basic awareness.
You have the grips. Yeah,
absolutely. Whereas in boxing, with very, very rare exceptions on a tiny minority of trainers, as soon as you come into the clinch, they are breaking you. And that's whether you, regardless of if you weigh 112 pounds or 312 pounds.
They're used to it. They're used to it. You'll see the same thing with karate guys and MMA that, they get one hit and they're used to point sparring and they go to step out of bounds and the guy keeps hitting them. They're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Muscle memory is real. Habits are real. And, it's always interesting to me, not only as a competitor myself, but as a fan to see how these guys coming from these different backgrounds are able to adapt to a bare knuckle platform, because it's unlike any other fighting platform or any ring I've ever stepped foot in. The BKFC ring built by the great Gary Grant Jr. It's weird. It's a circle, and they look like they're ropes, but they're not ropes. Your back hits them. It's like a brick wall. Right. They move up and down. They don't move back and forth. It's there's so many different.
Hey, Sean, I know you have to be objective, being that you're a commentator. But if you could pick one match that you would like to see, what would that be?
Now, is this current roster of BKFC fighters?
No, anyone. It could be anyone. It could be anyone.
Yeah, it would be really fun to see Mike Tyson. Mike's not going to do it. I believe Mike Tyson just turned 54, and Mike Tyson is on my mind because during this lockdown,
he could probably still knock anyone out.
I think he could. I've been watching a lot of boxing, and ESPN did a marathon. They did a Tyson marathon and an Ali marathon, and I've been watching both. I just actually finished watching for the 9,000th time at the Thrill in Manila today. But I went back and I watched Tyson versus Spinks. I watched Tyson versus Holmes. I watched his loss against Buster Douglas. I watched Tyson Holyfield 1 and 2. That was on ESPN. I've been searching online too. And just I'm in the Mike Tyson group. To see Mike Tyson, whether it's 24-year-old Mike Tyson or 54-year-old Mike Tyson, with his ferocity, again, it's bare knuckle. And if somebody would have tied him up and snatched him over the head, how would he have dealt with that? But just the ferocity, the fact that with his power and as big as he was, that he could throw a triple left hook, which is phenomenal. With that peekaboo style, the customato style, with it dipping down at 5'10", Mike Tyson would be phenomenal. So how about Mike Tyson versus Fedor Emelianenko in bare knuckle?
There we go.
Fedor Emelianenko. And I had a chance to I commentated a few of his fights. I commentated both of his fights in Affliction.
Awesome.
He did a couple of exhibitions in M1. I commentated his bout against Brett Rogers in Strikeforce. Fedor Emelianenko had an overhand right like nobody has ever had before or since in MMA. Right. And again, someone decidedly under 6 foot. I'm about 6'2.5". When I first met Fedor Emelianenko, and I remember it was in Almere, Holland at an M1 show, and in the lobby, and I looked and I thought, wow, that looks like Fedor Emelianenko, but that guy's like 5'9" or 5'10". And he's wearing a sweater
on TV, right? Yeah.
He called me the white devil.
But you think Fedor Emelianenko and bare knuckle, whatever era, whatever age you want to assign them, but since we're playing this fantasy match scenario, Fedor Emelianenko versus Mike Tyson in bare knuckle, how about that?
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Wonderful. So, Sean,
we can do it today.
I have a couple generalized questions from those that are in the fight community and, those that are just curious about, how things are in Kansas. I have one question here about the judging criteria.
Right.
The judging criteria. What is the judging criteria of bare knuckle fighting, and how are the credentials of the judges determined?
How are they selected? Yeah.
And furthermore, extending that, do you feel that the current
should former fighters be judges?
The certified combative judges for all of combat sports, should they have certain credentials? Currently a lot of states, they pretty much just have to buy a license or take an ABC course. Do you feel that having some experience in combat sports or jiu-jitsu or I mean, this is such a controversial topic across the board, and we've seen, just like Kansas doing the live as is each of the rounds scoring goes.
Live scoring.
So here's what I can tell you about.
I'm not the best with words, but y'all get what I'm talking about.
No, that's wonderful. So no, you're doing great. So you're one of my faves. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So to answer your question, when I came on the Kansas Athletic Commission, I'm in year 6. People were being given assignments based on friendships, longevity, and good attendance. And none of those work for me.
Good attendance.
So
punctual is key.
There is exactly one referee, and I'm talking across all combative sports that we regulate in Kansas, and we regulate 5: boxing, MMA, bare knuckle, Muay Thai, and kickboxing. There's exactly one referee left, and there are exactly 2 judges left. Everybody else is gone. And the reason they're gone is because they were not good enough. They did not go to ABC trainings, or if they went to ABC trainings, they failed. And some of them weeded themselves out. When they saw what the new standards were and the thresholds, they just stopped asking for assignments, or they just disappeared, or they wouldn't answer their phone, or they turned down assignments. So all of our officials for all of our combative sports have been to ABC trainings. Our top 2 MMA referees are both Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, and they're both instructors. Do I think you have to be a former fighter or a black belt to be a great referee or judge? No, but you certainly have to have that knowledge. I've been grappling for a long time.
Yeah,
I'm nowhere close to a black belt, but I certainly understand the submissions. Am I as fluid or as skillful as a black belt? No chance. But I can recognize an anaconda. I can recognize a calf slicer. I can recognize an electric chair and an inside heel hook. I understand all of that. I can see that. You have to have this basis of awareness. 10 years ago, there was this school of thought, which I never bought into. And this is one of the reasons why maybe I'm not one of the best liked people at the ABC convention. There was a school, which I revel in. I love that, actually. As a commentator, I have this need that I want everyone to like me. As a regulator, I'm kind of the opposite, mainly because the people who don't like you are probably people you don't want to have like you. I think that's a fair statement on that.
There you go.
But 10 years ago, there was a school of thought that to be a judge or an inspector or a referee, you need to have no conflict of interest. It's almost like you didn't even know what a fight was. I categorically am opposed to that way of thinking. You have to have, and there's Tom Sconzo to bring in. I would love to hear what Tom says on this. You have to have some
He has an
basis
opinion
of
on
knowledge.
this. Yeah.
If you don't know somebody in the sport, then why are you in the sport? I know literally zero about golf. Why would you want me involved in your golf tournament as a regulator or as an organizer or certainly as a commentator? I think that's insane. So I'll give you an example in Kansas. One of our top judges, and you see him on all the Invicta cards, is Stephen Graham. Stephen Graham is 28 years old. He was taught by Rob Hinds and by John McCarthy. Stephen Graham is still an active fighter. He's even main evented in Bellator. He's not under contract to Bellator now, but he's main evented in Bellator. His last fight was, I believe, 2 fights ago was in LFA. I've heard from other commissions saying, why do you have an active fighter as a judge? Because he is phenomenal. And Stephen's 28. When he's 35, he's going to be one of the top 5 judges in this sport. There have been times when Stephen has declared a conflict of interest, someone he fought, someone he's trained with, someone who doesn't like him, someone he doesn't like. And it's up to us as a commission to decide if he should stay on that fight. But to eliminate somebody like a Stephen Graham because he's an active fighter, to me, is nonsense. Marcio La Selva, one of our top 2 referees, he owns a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school. He has people who fight in Kansas. That's a conflict of interest only if he is involved directly in that fight. If we would eliminate Marcio La Selva, we'd be a far worse state for it. So the school of thought now, I think largely, and I know Rob Hinds is with us, Tommy Sconzo, I'd love to hear what they have to say, is that get the best people. You know, they can tell us the conflict of interest. I don't think that a ref or a judge should ever remove themselves. I think they declare their conflict. Thank you, Sheena. I think they declare their conflict. Let us as regulators remove you or keep you on that fight. But you have to have some conflict of interest. Tom Sconzo is a fighter. Rob Hinds is a fighter. He was under Keith Hackney, for God's sakes. We all have conflicts of interest.
I have worked as a commission inspector for the UFC. I've worked as a commission inspector for Bellator. I've been a licensed professional matchmaker, a promoter, a referee, a fighter. I mean, I've done all of it, and people would, I mean, I never had any complaints. I mean, you know, like a hater here and there, but as you said, the commission, I mean, they would always overturn it because it didn't matter what I was doing, whether I was being a cutman or a fighter or this and that. I was always professional. I was always non-biased. I always follow the rules. You know, nobody ever got any favoritism or anything. So
of course.
I really feel what you were talking about right there, and I mean I agree with it. I agree with it. It's just walking on eggshells, kind of almost, you know, with a lot of it. It's like, oh well, the best judges are former competitors or coaches or this and that, but they can't be non-biased and it's this team and that team. Well, only if they're not doing having an official turnout or outcome of this in particular bout, you know, I mean, it gets difficult and it can be kind of confusing at times. So, well, you know,
I think Tom had a pretty strong comment on that too.
So guys, I'll say this, and again, I'll use my commission in Kansas, and the biggest show that we have is Invicta. We're home to Invicta. We have every Invicta show now. They play it in Kansas City, Kansas. Shannon Knapp, who lives about 10 minutes from where I live in the suburb of Shawnee, Kansas, good friend, and that's a phenomenal promotion. So, and I know that you know Shannon really well, Sheena. She's a great person.
I do. She's an awesome person, awesome boss, awesome person.
Yeah. Rob is refereed for her. So, you know, that is our main show. We've had the UFC. We've had 3 world title boxing fights in the last 18 months in Kansas. We were going to have Bare Knuckle at least until COVID-19 when that was canceled 48 hours before.
To be continued.
But if you look at our top judges, so I mentioned Stephen Graham, 28 years old. He's an active pro MMA fighter. Another one of our judges is Greg DeVilbiss. Greg DeVilbiss has never fought. I don't know that he's ever trained, but he is a spectacular judge. He is an A+ judge. He's passed numerous courses, including Rob's course, He grades out phenomenally well. He's always watching. He's knowledgeable. His father was an amateur boxer. He loves it. Does a great fighter, and I'm going to ask some hypotheticals, does a great fighter automatically make a great judge or referee? No chance.
Absolutely not.
Can someone who's never fought or trained be excellent in both? Absolutely. The common denominator is they have to commit. They have to continually look for education. Rob Hinds loves using the word evolve, and you have to evolve. You know, I was watching these Tyson and Ali fights. So earlier today, again, I watched The Thrill in Manila. I've seen it 9,000 times, but I watched it again because I have a lot of free time on my hands. That's from 1975. Fundamentally, boxing is pretty much the same as it was in 1975. That's 45 years ago. Throw on an MMA from 20 years ago, and it looks like a completely different sport. So if you're not evolving as a fighter, if you're not evolving as a referee, a judge, a regulator, what are you doing in this sport? You need to come into this sport as a fan first and foremost. And then secondly, you have to be open-minded and continually trying to improve. We all know doctors. Doctors don't get out of medical school and say, I'm good. That's it. 40 years later, I'm good.
Great analogy.
They're continually reading, publishing, going to seminars, conducting in trials, research.
You never know it all.
Right, Vince. That is, in my opinion, that is the approach that we all have to have on the regulatory, the officiating side in MMA, in bare knuckle, in boxing, in every combative sport.
Right. And speaking of that, Rob Hinds, we haven't introduced this wonderful, awesome face with this interesting facial hair. We have something on here.
Rob's been waiting a while, and he said he had some comments on this as did Tom. So I wanted to get them in and have their comments and their opinions.
Absolutely. Rob is we've heard Sean speak about Rob. I don't know, Rob. Who are you, Rob? Tell us who you are, Rob. I don't want to mess it up.
First of all, everybody, thanks for having me on.
Thanks
Great
for being
to be
here,
on this amazing panel. Sean and I have been friends for a long, long time. Much love, brother. Mr. Sconzo, glad to see you're feeling well. And Sheena and Vince, thank you for having me on. So this is one of my favorite discussions of all. You know, regulation, how it actually works, how it really works, and then a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. And Sean touched on a lot of it. And unfortunately, in combat sports in general, but especially mixed martial arts, it's not a performance-based sport. So when we talk about officials, when we talk about assignments, levels of assignments, those types of things, it's not based on who's the most qualified, you know, who's the best performer. It's based on a bunch of different things that don't, like how you stand with a commission, whether you're friendly with the commissioners or not. There's so many other pieces that come into play that actually don't matter. Kind of to Sean's point, you know, it is good to know what a leg lock feels like. It is good experience to be punched and kicked in the face and know what that feels like and to feel a little bit dizzy and all those things. But it's not entirely necessary to be a good official. Realistically, to be a good official, just in a nutshell, is knowledge of the sport, knowledge of the rules and regulations, and the most important part is assessment. You know, from a referee standpoint, assessing when somebody is actually in trouble versus looking like they're in trouble. How tight a submission is. You know, whether somebody that was struck with a punch, a kick, a knee, and elbow are able to continue on their own. Can they fight back?
How they fall. Yeah.
Defending themselves. So there's a lot more to it on the officiating side, other than being a purple belt, black belt, brown belt, jiu-jitsu, being a Muay Thai professional, you know, all those other things. It's all valuable, but realistically, if you're not good at assessing and decision-making, officiating is definitely not for you.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've seen that with a lot of combat sport. There we call them professionals, you know, professional fighters, professional coaches, and they'll freeze when it comes to these moments and they can't react. They can't make the right decision. They can't make decisions quickly for both fighter safety and
well, realistically,
all that. So
whether you're a referee, a judge, even a commission representative, can you make decisions under pressure? Period.
The correct decisions. And that is so important. And that is so important. And I'm so glad that, you're touching base on that.
The other thing is a good understanding of the rules. People who speak out about, oh, they don't like what judges do, they don't like what referees are doing, everybody has their own opinion on the rules. There's very, very few, and Sean and Tom could definitely attest to this. There's very, very few people in this industry across the board that truly understand the rules, the regulations, how they work, and most importantly, how to apply them. So I think those are a lot of things to where when you watch the National Hockey League or Major League Baseball, everybody's in tune to exactly what those rules are because they're the same everywhere you go. We don't have that in combat sports yet.
We're all working on that, Robert. At the last commission meeting with Corey Schaefer, we wrote the unified rules of kickboxing, the way it is, the unified rules of MMA, because everybody wants to get into the ring. K1, low kick, American style. In New York, last year, I sanctioned 47 shows. That's more than 2/3 of the ABCs that are out there.
Yeah.
And again, like Sean was alluding to, a lot of people. My first referee course was with you about 15 years ago, and I've done John McCarthy's, I've done Kevin McDonald, and it's great to do that and to learn. But people ask me now, they'll come up to me and tell me they took your course, they took not John's anymore, Kevin, and they want me to put them in the ring or the cage. And I can't do that because it's not the way it works. It's great that they passed the course, but I need to have them shadow. I need to have them go home and watch about 100 different fights and not watch the fight, but watch the officials. And then I want to talk to them about it. I want to ask them what they're looking at, why they're looking at it, and assessing. As you said, it's not what a fighter does in the ring. It's the effect of what he's done that I want to know about.
Right. Tom, have you ever sat in on or attended one of Rob's courses?
He was the first course that I ever took.
Right, because I've taken it too, and I thought it was awesome, and I seen a good amount of people actually feel it. So I was just wondering if I was special or anything of that. I don't know. I hold Rob in really high regards, and I get what you're saying. You want to.
I did this at Friday Night Fights, Justin Blair's show, which was one of the better Muay Thai shows, professional shows. And Rami, who I had repped in the past, who was a great Muay Thai fighter and great coach, had said, Tom, I want to be a rep. So sitting there, I've known him for a long time as a great fighter. I said, all right. I said, I'll put you in there. It was an undercard fight. It was probably one of the best refereeing. He understood everything, his timing, he knew where to be, when to be there, and did phenomenal. And I said, that's what it's all about, taking a pro fighter who understands. But that's rare. That is rare to do that. When I'm doing big shows or shows that have a lot of top fighters on it, I'll bring in Brian Miner. I'll bring in Keith Peterson. I'll bring in Big Dan Bergliotta, because I'll bring in Wayne Spinola, one of my best friends for the last 20 years.
I like Wayne.
Wayne's a great guy. Yeah.
Great rep. And I'll have my own reps say, hey, Tom, you got to be loyal to us. We're here. You got to use. And I'm like, no. What I want you to do is watch Wayne Spinola in the ring. I want you to watch him and then tell me what he's doing different that you don't do. And that's what I demand from my officials, is to follow the best referees. And the best compliment I ever got, I reffed with Big Dan and Brian Miner for about 5 years at Foxwood, and somebody said, you look like a smaller version of Dan. And I reffing, and I said, that has been my role model in the ring, watching him every fight and just saying, what does he do that I like? And Dan does everything that I like. So
Right.
that's what I tell
Best of the best.
Yeah,
And that's
man.
awesome. And that's awesome that you have that. I've had that with working with Big Dan, and I've also had that with working with Rob for a long time. I worked with Rob for, I think I worked with him at Bellator. We've worked at HFC, Alliance MMA. I always Rob really helped me when I was kind of, figuring things out early on, in my career, not only as a cutman, but, as a referee, picking his brain and, this and that. And he's local to me. So he's kind of like my my little mini mentor that he didn't even know that he was. He didn't even know that he was. Like, it was always so much information. And Rob, Pretty Rob, we call him Pretty Rob. I can't say his last name right. Rob Margal.
Madrigal.
Yeah, Margal and Joshua Stewart and
You should take the time to talk to Bill Clancy.
and Bill Clancy. We
We were
have.
gonna have Bill on, but he wasn't comfortable with like joining the live stream for whatever reason.
Bill is probably one of the most knowledgeable persons
Yes.
I've ever met. On
Bill's great.
I mean, as
Yes,
a referee,
absolutely.
just to have him or to watch and then ask him a question after, I encourage any of my officials to pick Bill Clancy's brain. He's like the Burt Sugar of refereeing.
Absolutely.
He's a historian. He's brilliant, and he understands the why. And that is the most important part, as Rob was saying, the why of officiating, understanding, being able to look a fighter in the eyes and know what he's there. He's either telling you to save him.
And he will. And he'll do that. I remember having I hate to put you on the spot here, Bill, but I remember in Cancun at the Bare Knuckle event we had there, and it was Beck Rawlings versus Cecilia. I can't
Flores.
pronounce. Yeah, Flores, CC Flores, and that was the first female fight that he really seen get bloody like that, and he was kind of freaking out a little bit, you know what I mean? And but Cecilia was coming forward with every chance. She didn't look pretty, but you know what? She still had the fighter's chance, and we had a lot of interaction. In between that fight, I was the cut man for that fight, and we had words after it, and he thanked me for arguing with him. And I've never had a referee do that before in my life. I've never, and that speaks volumes on his professionalism and
Feel proud because Bill's a no nonsense guy. He really is.
And that, it's just he never seen anything like that before. Well, neither did anybody else, Bill. In your experience and all that. And it was a great fight. It was a wonderful fight. And it was
Best of the best.
Yeah. That's my good Bill. That's my good Bill memory. And I think we're all blessed to just have all these wonderful officials that have all this experience and all this knowledge. We got Sean Wheelock. We got Tom, I don't want to slaughter your last name. Rob Hinds,
Sconzo, right?
Sconzo. Is it Sconzo? I want to say Gonzo. Sconzo. I'll still mess it up. In closing, because we're getting ready, to wrap the show up. I think this has been really informative. I think we have a lot of questions that have been answered. A lot of light given in on what really goes on behind the scenes before these events are able to happen. We have fighters that got to get medicals. We have athletic commissions that, there's these rules and
hey, real quick before we close out, Sheena, I have a couple questions for these guys.
All right, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. If the bare knuckle rules were standardized, what would you guys like to see? What do you not like that's already happening, and what would you like to see in the future? We can start with Sean, and then we can go to Rob, and then Tom. you don't
Yeah,
mind?
Vince, so the Bare Knuckle Summit that we were going to host for the Kansas Athletic Commission, I know Tom was going to come, and this is something that's been postponed. It was set to happen the first week in May, obviously postponed because of COVID-19, but not canceled, just postponed. This is what we had talked about a lot, we meaning essentially Adam Rohrbach, our executive director, and myself. What do we want to put forward? We need a standardization of rounds. Are they 2-minute rounds, 3-minute rounds, 5-minute rounds, 1-minute rounds? It's up to the promoter right now.
How many rounds? Are there 5? Or there 7?
It is. That's
It is.
right.
Yeah, main event.
2-minute rounds at BYB and that stupid triangle.
Right.
Anyway,
Right. Well, exactly. And so most states will look at what's the maximum number, I say states, most commissions more correctly, because we're talking about tribal too, will look at what's the maximum number of rounds we will allow. Generally, the answer is 36 because they will allow a 12-round boxing fight. 12 times 3 is 36, right?
Fair,
I wouldn't
fair.
want to see 36 minutes in bare knuckle. I certainly wouldn't want to see it in MMA. You know, you think 25 is standardized for MMA, but there was a promotion in Oklahoma who had a one-night tournament, and Brock Larson finished as the runner-up, and he was in 3 MMA fights for a total of something like 42 minutes and 40 seconds.
I
So
think Valor
there
did
are
a tournament, right, where you had to fight more than once. Yeah,
right.
I
So
think 15
there are
rounds, you're good to go.
there are variances of what happens. You know, in Kansas, we allow one-night tournaments. Invictus taking advantage, but the math cannot exceed 5 rounds or 25 minutes. So we need a standardization of that, because right now a promotion could say we're going to have 12 5-minute rounds. Yeah, and some commissions might allow that. They will certainly allow 12 3-minute rounds if they allow that in boxing. They've passed, and they've allowed and they've passed for bare knuckle. Also,
there could be standards. Right?
I'm very flexible and I'm very open-minded with whether you fight in a ring or a cage. And a lot of that is just being pragmatic. In Kansas, we have a lot of what I call mom and pop shows, or in pro wrestling, right? They're called house shows. They're non-televised shows. They're in indoor soccer facilities, National Guard armories, high school gyms, community recreation centers. And if they want to do hybrid shows, and 80% of our shows in Kansas are hybrid shows, meaning they have more than one combat sport discipline. Right. You don't always have the room to set up a ring and a cage. You don't always have the money to purchase a ring and a cage. So with the consent of the boxers, and I know some boxing people are going to cringe on this, but we've allowed with the participation, the full consent of the fighters, we've allowed boxing in a cage before. We allow kickboxing, both a ring and a cage. We allow both MMA in a ring and a cage. We talked about this as an entire commission. We'll allow bare knuckle in a ring or a cage. What I do not want to see is bare knuckle on an open mat. And I'm not picking on Valor. And I have some friends who are at that promotion, people I worked with at Bellator. I feel it's unsafe for any sport that allows strikes to the head to be on an open mat without an enclosure. That's something that needs to be addressed as well.
With the pit, it's really, really only
too much room for error.
Yeah, absolutely.
Karate points, leave the pit as it was.
Right. Open mats, pits, you need some type of barrier. And I think that's common sense. We've all seen people take bad concussions, bad knockouts. The human body does weird things when you're knocked unconscious, and to fall without a barrier or a restraint, I think really is leading you towards a very, very dangerous.
My friend, Leroy Johnson, fought for PFL and suffered a neck injury, actually severed a nerve in his spine, and he is still recovering after almost a year and a half.
Yeah.
Leroy Johnson, heavyweight pro MMA fighter, was pegged for the UFC and everything, fell weird on a flat mat, and now his neck's all messed up and he can't do anything. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it just
you're good. You're good. Let's get
I wanted to familiarize
Rob's
it with
opinion
everybody.
on this.
Yeah, so just a couple quick things. I'm going to tag on to Sean. I think the amount of rounds and the duration of the rounds definitely needs to be unified. You know, if it's boxing, bare knuckle, if they do 3-minute rounds, a fighter can't compete more than 5 3-minute rounds in an evening. Things of that sort. Keep the round duration the same, and keep the amount of rounds competed in an evening the same.
Well,
the other thing that's important
from Sean, though, on that, right? Sean said he's okay with one night tournaments as long as there's like a standard there. But I think
Well, that's the math.
like the purpose of the conference, right? So that
right, Vince. Yeah, that's the
make the decisions can vote and come to an agreement. There's always going to be two sides, but if you have everyone that makes the decisions and all the athletic commissions and people that are super involved can have their side of the story and come up with a single unified type of rule.
Right, Vince, and just to be clear on that, the one-night MMA tournaments we allow in Kansas, a fighter can fight up to 3 times a night. There's a minimum of 30 minutes between bouts, and there is a full concussion test. I should know the name of the test. I don't, but it's the same test that NFL players are administered. I should know the name of this test.
It's a neuro exam. I've had fighters that had to do that before. Basically,
there's the doctor's last name. It's like the whisk, but it's not the whisk. But there's a name on the test of that. But the math cannot exceed 5 rounds and 25 minutes. I'm looking for a standardization. Dave Feldman has never gone more than 5 rounds. I think that it would be great to have 7-round championship fights. I wouldn't want to see more than that. I think 2-minute rounds are perfect. But again, right now there's no standardization
for main events or championship fights.
Right.
At one point, right?
It's a lot like the early days of MMA, where some promotions are doing 3-minute rounds, some are doing 5-minute rounds.
Figure it out, man. Yeah.
Pride did 10-minute rounds. What are you going to do?
I do 3-minute rounds at my promotion because it's cheaper. Anyways, go ahead.
Rob, do you agree with that point, though? It's just the standardization. It's getting everybody together. And look, we all know the unified rules of MMA, and Rob was on the committee with me for a long time. That's a joke because there are states, and I'm a guy who names names like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Missouri, New Jersey, who just flat out refuse to implement them. So unified is a bit of a misnomer, but get as unified as you can with rules and at least give people a guideline and a baseline and a borderline.
And suddenly you have a ton of smaller bare knuckle promotions popping up. So there has to be somewhat of a governing body and somewhat of a rule set for them to abide by as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, you being on the East Coast, I mean, you work closely with Kim Sumbler, who's fantastic in New York, and she's done a phenomenal job in that commission. But you also know that there are not very easy commissions to work with as well. And there's a lot of reasons why people don't want to unify. Sometimes it really comes down to pettiness and ego. Other times it comes down to real principle where people think that they're in the right, even if they're in the minority. It's tricky. And again, unification is a misnomer, but at least give people guidelines. And that's what I'd like to see in bare knuckle. At least have a standardization that says, we feel as this body, whoever has come together, we think that the maximum should be X number of rounds. We think the rounds should be scheduled for X number of minutes. That's the type of thing that I'm looking for.
I'm going to go with the reality of what I've seen and what the statistics with Dr. Don Mosley's putting together from the Association of Ringside Physicians on injuries. Now I know Sheena fought in the one in Florida in the Rock. It was 3 minutes. The other bare knuckle, and and quite honestly, my job is as a regulator, as a liaison to commissions, to convince the ones that aren't on board why we're a sport that is paying attention to fighter safety standards. I think to sell a 2-minute round with the statistics that we have is going to make a lot more sense than putting somebody in the ring for 3 minutes or for more than that. Let's build on what we have, which is a reputation that these fighters are staying healthy. We've had literally out of I think the statistics, and I had put this whole brochure together for the seminar, the summit that we were having based on Dr. Mussey's findings, and talking to people like Dr. Peter Werner, who's a neurosurgeon, who was at Florida, who I introduced you to Bare Knuckle, looking at what we can tell people now that the injuries are being controlled. And I think we've only had 2 concussions out of 90 bouts. And even the one that we sent to the hospital turned out to be a non-concussion, but we erred on the side. So I want to standardize it to what we're doing now. 5 2-minute rounds is exciting. The fighters are taking a beating, but we're not putting their lives in danger, and it's entertaining. I said that earlier before you jumped on, Sean. For the first time, because I've gotten to know Sheena, when she did that fight, and what she looked like after the fight really got to me. It was very, very upsetting. And yeah, but it went away in a week or two. And I don't want to see what a fighter's going to look like after 3 minutes and
Right.
5 rounds. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, look, yeah,
has created an amazing format, and it works. And if we could standardize it, tweaking the rules a little bit, I do like the overhook with the continuous punching. There are things that we can do, and there are things that we can tweak to make a little bit better, and we'll talk about that at the conference. But the duration and the number of rounds, I think we're giving the fans their money's worth. The fighters are doing their best, and I don't think the fight's going to be any better going beyond 5 rounds.
Look at the end of the day, doing the same thing everywhere you go is the most important thing.
Exactly.
Whatever that is, whether it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 rounds, 7 rounds, none of that matters if people don't agree on it. And, Tom, with all the great work you do in the areas you work in, that's your work, but it's not your work everywhere. And unlike the NHL or the NBA, there will never be unified anything if politicians are involved, if individual states are involved, if individual sanctioning bodies are involved, and there's no grand organization overseeing this. We're never
commission. Absolutely.
And that's just the absolute truth of combat sports. Until somebody like a Mark Cuban wants to put in the millions and millions of dollars to start an NHL type organization for MMA, we're going to be in this position. But guys like you, Tom, Sean, myself, everybody that does work, there's a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge and experience in this sport. There's guys like Kevin McDonald and Blake Grice. We talked about trainings earlier, and Tom made a really good point. Training is only getting somebody information. They have to go out and they have to apply that information under pressure. They have to prove themselves. They have to work their way up the ladder. We don't have any of that. We have small pieces put in place where even when you go to, some of the best trainings out there, whether it's Blake or Kevin or anybody, they're getting great information, and then they're going back and saying, hey, I have this certificate saying I passed this class, and they get put in the game. That doesn't happen in real sports organizations.
It shouldn't.
Find me a billionaire that wants to invest in this thing. I'd happily be on the board of directors. And I know Sean would, I know Tom would, I know people that are really in the know in combat sports that would do this thing. It's a shame because a lot of people are individually doing good work in the areas where they do work, but it's not enough.
Oh, Rob Hinds for the win with everything. Absolutely.
It's very simple.
It's very simple when you explain it. But it is so important. Just like you said, like the unified rules. Like we'll all put these rules. Some people won't like it, but you know what? Everybody's gonna have to abide by the same.
It's
rules.
Still a young sport. It's still a young sport. It's continuously evolving, continuously growing.
Sporting as a whole.
It's young as
that still. Will disagree with Rob. Rob isn't from the bare knuckle world. He doesn't officiate bare knuckle fighting. He is an ADC official. He's a teacher. He's an educator. He's a referee. He's so knowledgeable, and what he is really saying is so important right now and so educational. And that's it. Everything you just said, Rob, yes, that is awesome. But how do we get to that point? Yes, we need a billionaire. We need like Elon Musk, all right? Somebody take the joint out of Elon's freaking hand and get him to invest in our business and, throw some money at it, because that's what it's going to take, because a lot of these people are politicians, and what are politicians like? They like money, all right? So
All right. Well,
I was on that one. I was going way on the back nine, but
I wanted to hear Rob's rebuttal real quick. But we got to close soon. But I wanted to hear, his rebuttal to me saying this is a fairly new sport.
Yeah, Vince, with all due respect, when we look at other combat sports, MMA is new. I get it. It's newer. But here's the deal. Too many people are living on it's still a new sport. It's still this. Listen, we have some really good minds that are in this industry that could make changes the right way, and we don't. So, this whole the sport's new. No, the sport's not new anymore. Everybody knows what's up. Everybody knows what goes on within the sport. The back end stuff, the regulation, people that see it on TV, commentators like Sean, sanctioning representatives like Tom. Everybody knows what's up. It's getting politicians to agree on things and just say this is what's best for the sport without any agenda. And we don't have that. The whole this sport is new thing, people need to get over it. There's some wonderful minds in this industry that can definitely make this right. We're just not allowed to.
Oh.
Hopefully we can make that change.
Oh, the truth. Oh, Rob Hinds with the truth every time. And he came on a whim last minute, like, hey, you want to be on the show? Boom. Rob was there. He wants to educate. He wants to inform. He wants to share his knowledge. And I think that is just so wonderful. And, I appreciate you, Rob. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, sharing your knowledge, discussing all sorts of different things. I know it's all over the place. We don't really have one direction here or there. It's just kind of bouncing off the walls, and you have just responded beautifully.
Thank you guys. And to be honest with you, when I heard Sean Wheelock and Tom Sconzo were on the show, I had to be
part of it then, right? You felt left out. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we can close this out, guys. Thanks for being on. I think it was a great show.
Thank you.
Very informative. You guys are.
Did you learn anything? Vince? I sure did. And I'm sure everybody else did. And that was the point of this podcast, was to educate, inform, let you guys know what goes on kind of behind the scenes, because nobody really knows. You see the events on TV. You see them on pay-per-view. You see people complaining about this and that. This is the real deal. These are the things and the steps and the people that are working so hard to put all these MMA events out, bare knuckle events, working hard at the commission, all these, and working for free, like Sean Wheelock. He works for free. You know what I mean? Who works for free? We love the sport. There's so many men and women out here that are just, really putting their hearts and their souls into everything that you may not see, making your events, these sporting events, possible. And people like we've had on here tonight, like Thomas, like Rob Hinds, like Sean Wheelock, even you, Vince, even you as well. All these people are working in the background to make these events happen. And these events would not be possible without people like Sean, Tom, and Rob.
Thank you, Sheena. Vince, thank you as well. I really appreciate you guys having me on. And Rob, Tommy, great to see you both.
Thanks for being on. All right, guys. Y'all have a good weekend. See ya.
Thank you, guys.
Will too. Thank you very much. Look forward to time. All right, Vince.
That's it. Yeah. Some great knowledge there, right?
Yeah, dude, that show went on really, really long, but it was really back and forth, and it was good. It was controversial. And then we brought in Rob Hinds, and I knew that would be like fucking kind of weird a little bit. You know what I mean?
Missed John Lewis tonight, but we'll have him back on. He can't not be on.
I'm a little bummed too, but he made me a little bit worried, and then but he had really bad cell signal because they're out the lake house right now, So, and he didn't want to misrepresent, the state of Mississippi being, he can't talk because the shit's all fucking, we know how
Can't
Mississippi.
do any worse than me or Jason. So, it'd be all right. Real quick, we give a shout out to our sponsors again. Mary Jane's
Oh,
House.
we're still alive.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fucking
Go check
fabulous.
those guys out.
Yes, absolutely. Our sponsors, Mary Jane's House of Glass. Go to Mary Jane's House of Glass for all your alternative smoking needs of your herbage. They got CBD oils and all sorts of holistic remedies. Needs CBD oil, your hands hurt, go to Mary Jane's House of Glass.
Empire Fighting Championship. Definitely check them out. Go check out their new YouTube channel. You can see all the fights they've had so far. Some really great fights with some big names on the coast of Mississippi. So definitely go check those guys out as well.
Absolutely. Love Empire.
And real quick, we're gonna post the guest websites. So ISKA Sports MMA.
ISKA and Kansas City Athletic Commission. ISKA Sport MMA. We had Mississippi Athletic State Commission, but they were unable to connect last night just because, satellite and whatnot. We're going to have them on a later on show, but they are a part of the bare knuckle sport itself. We've had a lot of events in Biloxi, Mississippi. We love John Lewis and Lita and all those guys.
Definitely check out Fight Bananas. Our sponsors, our parent company here, Bare Knuckles and Brews. Go check us out on YouTube. And last and not least, check out Bare Knuckle Hall of Fame, Scott Burt. He's full of knowledge. He'll tell you all about it.
Sounds great. Awesome.
Right,
thanks, Vince. Look forward to seeing you next week. Oh, the Corona? Mine's empty. Yeah. I gotta get more. Not that I fucking need it because I can't follow directions on a podcast. I'm getting better. Episode number 2. Give me a minute. I'm a fighter. I'm not a journalist person. All right.
See ya. Bye.
Give me a minute. Bye.